Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is The Right Path and I'm Paul. In today's video, we actually have a little special something coming up. So I've been invited to do what's called a a care collab. So a care collaboration with a couple of few growers from around the world, courtesy of Miss Nina over at Ninja Orchids, who I believe is in Spain. I'm based here in the United States, here in Las Vegas, the middle of the desert. And before I get started, I just wanted to give you all a list of the other participants who will be collaborating in this event. So just to start, I'm going to name them out and also put the names on the screen. And please feel welcome to check out all these pages because we will be sharing our specific cares and a bit of guides towards slipper orchids for today. So I kind of feel lucky because it's sort of my specialty, particularly Paphiopedilums. And here are the participants. Hello plant lovers, the Orchid Saga, Ed's Orchids, Karen's Orchids, Hillbilly Orchids, Fernanda Nascimento Orchids and Succulents, Matt by Nature, Trisha's Orchid Life, Tropical Plants Finland, Simply Orchids, etc., Orchids by the Lake, Mary G. Orchids and More, Beauty of Orchids and Plants, Dee Dee Blooms, Danielle's Orchid Ranch, Joyous Orchids, and Techie Orchids. Lastly but not least, I will mention again Miss Nina at Ninja Orchids, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this collab. So, jumping into our first topic about our Paphiopedilums. First off, this care collab is about slipper orchids, which actually encompass quite a few different types of orchids. And the main two that I'm familiar with are Phragmipediums, which are pretty native to South America, and then Paphiopedilums, which are native to Southeast Asia. I don't own any Phragmipediums anymore, but I have a slew of um, Paphiopedilums. And just to get into the background of these beauties, again, I primarily have the Paphiopedilum lady slipper orchid, so my plants hail particularly from Southeast Asia, Asia, and I believe as far north as like the Himalayan mountains. I do have a species right over here, Fairyannum, that does come from a cooler climate in the Himalayan mountains. And another thing about Paphiopedilums, they are sort of semi-terrestrial. So where they're living in these habitats in Asia, they're not in trees like we know our Phalaenopsis to be, but they're not necessarily in the ground like a terrestrial plant. They're semi-terrestrial, so they're on top of the ground. Their roots grow through leaf litter on top of the forest floor, through the structures of bushes, in the crevices of rocks and cliffs, and they're very durable plants despite the reputation that orchids get for being very hard to take care of. I actually definitely recommend them, which segues into my next topic of availability. Now, some people may be taken back because they probably, never seen a Paphiopedilum somewhat available in, your local grocery store, but they are available in nurseries, primarily the hybrids. You won't find species too much they're available in nurseries primarily, which is where you can often find species. Now, the hybrids, what I just showed you, which tend to be a bit more durable because they're bred to eventually live in your home, or maybe not, but for the most part, they are bred for home cultivation. The hybrids are a lot more sturdy and a bit more widespread. And many times you'll find them, I always find them in the fall season, particularly because a lot of them bloom during Halloween going into the fall and winter when the cooler seasons start. So I don't know them necessarily um, to be sparked to bloom by the temperature change. In my experience, it's always been the light, but the temperature kind of lets them know that the season is changing, which would be my hint. But giving these babies at least like 12 hours of light should work. But anywho, availability. You'll definitely find them in fall. I've seen them in springtime. I rarely see them in summertime because for the most part, these are not hot growing plants. So they actually prefer to just vegetatively grow in the summer. And most people prefer to purchase an orchid in bloom. So let's go ahead and jump into a quick care guide. I don't want to spend too much time dwindling on the care because I have quite a few videos on specific care on Paphiopedilums, whether it's repotting, the watering. But really quickly, something that I wanted to touch on was the watering and medium, the light, and of course, a bit of the humidity and temperatures that are required to grow. So first off, with regard to the medium, again, they are semi-terrestrial plants. So you want to have something that is very water retentive, but provides good drainage as well. So not only do you need a pot with drainage holes at the bottom, but you should have a medium that is airy, provides drainage, but at the same time does retain moisture because the roots of a Paphiopedilum cannot dry out. I do grow most of my collection in organic medium, excuse me, all my collection in organic medium. It is a mix primarily of bark and perlite. Many times there's charcoal and there is sphagnum moss at the bottom. I do make sure all my moss is covered. I did learn from this orchid girl that the algae buildup is insane when the moss is exposed to the light. But I also have it covered because it helps me with the moisture retention, which segues into our next topic of watering. So because paths need to be moist, you never want to let the pot go fully dry. I normally gauge that by the weight of my pot. I understand how it should feel. I also gauge it sometimes by squeezing the pot. If the pot is extremely moist, as you squeeze or as you squeeze your cups, I have cups, as I squeeze my cup, you can sort of hear the medium a bit more clear as it's dry, as opposed to when it's wet, there's a bit less of a sound. Again, the weight for me is an indicator. Color is also a great indicator. Once the medium starts to get light, you know it's time to water and dampen and get that dark visualization again, so you know your plant is hydrated. Now, one thing I will touch on with water, I've been fortunate enough not to have to worry about things like pH, but when I moved from DC to Nevada, I did come across a challenge with my water being too hard, meaning that there's so much minerals in the water that there'll be a buildup of that mineral composition within my pots. No bueno. Um, I don't think I have an example right now to show. Oh, I actually have a Phalaenopsis that I have to repot. And the pot, actually, I thought it was mold, but it's actually all the residue from the calcium buildup. It's pretty insane. And this was sort of an experiment of mine of watering with the tap for 1 week straight without flushing, and that's what happened. And that's sort of an experiment foul because I have a slew of fowls that I get from the grocery store, and those are normally what I experiment on. And now my dog is over here sniffing it. What do you want? All right. So again, you want to make sure you're watering with a mineral content that's not too high because the roots of Paphiopedilums do not regrow. In very rare instances, they'll regrow, but if you lose any of the roots, you really have to count on the plant putting out completely new ones. There's no branching here like we have, and we are fortunate enough with the phals. Next, let's talk about light. I am a very strong believer that no plant deserves or should live in low light. I do have a medium range light setup here. I don't know what the lux or the par, whatever those technical terms are. I just know that my lights are from Barina and from the Orchid hobbyist, which now goes by Botanical LEDs. So I've never really experienced too many challenges with blooming, especially because I find that paths really enjoy a good medium light. I do have a path, my my Rishardianum, which I have shown in a few prior videos. These are what are considered the Polyantha subgenus, and they're actually accustomed to growing in full sun in the wild, as well as, the king of paths, that Rothschildianum that everyone always talks about. The big path that I showed is actually has Rothschildianum in there. I'm sort of obsessed with it. It's in a few of my collection. So yes, the watering, definitely something that you would want to get under control with regard to Paphiopedilums or any type of slipper orchids, because the roots are very, very, very sensitive to drying out. And lastly, the last point of the care, before I get into the ultimate last topic of my recommendation, the last point of the care is temperature and humidity. As you can see, I have 3 humidifiers going, 1, 2, and 1 down there. And the reason why I prefer high humidity is because it slows down the drying out of the pot. So being here in the desert, my humidity is often below 20%. Actually, the low gets probably as low as 14 right now because I don't run my artificial air as much. But I always recommend, you know, having a humidifier, but it's not something that's a necessity for plants, but it does help in the longevity of your blooms, and it does assist with the drying out time of your pots. With regard to temperature, the only thing I'm going to say is that if you're comfortable, the plants are comfortable. So basically, I find that slipper orchids, Paphiopedilums, for the most part, if you are dealing with hybrids, are going to be completely fine with your normal home temperatures. When you get into things like species, you are going to have to try to replicate more of how they would grow in the wild, although most species that you purchase have been cultivated over the years for home growing. If you do purchase a species, something with one name, like my Fairyannum here, my Fairyannum is okay in warm temperatures, but when I was in DC, I used to leave this baby in the window in my bathroom quite often, and it bloomed. So it just goes to show that some of them, with a bit more care and study, uh, can just take completely different environments. Most of my paths are really warm growers, but again, like my Fairyannum, I also have a Delanatii that is a fairly moderate grower, which seem to also be able to take a cooler temperature drop. But when you're dealing with that, you also have to scale back on your watering, because now you don't want your pots to be wet through a cold night. All right. So to sort of wrap this up, what I wanted to do is give a recommendation of Paphiopedilums, and I'm not going to make it complicated. What I'm going to recommend is hybrids. For anyone who is just starting out, go to your local flower shop or head to a nursery, whether it's brick and mortar or online, and scoop out a hybrid Paphiopedilum. They're actually very easy to learn how to take care of. I would say one of the biggest challenges with the Paphiopedilums is the fact that they grow so slow. So a lot of us may be bored with it. I'm not. I do think that they grow fast, but I have hundreds of plants, so I always have stuff to look at. But yes, I would definitely recommend hybrid, um, especially something that has mottled leaves. The mottled leaves, in my experience, can take a bit more fluctuation of light levels, whether that be a little higher light or lower light. Things with paths with a bit more of strappy leaves. Let's see, a bit more strappy and all green leaves without the mottling prefer a higher light. And again, I grow them all under the same medium light. So I just think that moderation and balance is really what's key to really any plants. And with that, I want to thank you all for staying tuned to this video. Again, please check out all the other hobbyists and all the other growers who have participated in this care collab. I don't know why I can't get that word out. Uh, Again, thank you so much, and see you all in the next video.